But she told me before he didn't drive.
Wow. This grandson that Harvey, great grandson that Harvey went was 10 pounds. It was huge. His mother was a normal person. And there's Beth Gray. Hi. And there's John Gray.
Hello, Gray.
Hey.
Hey, John.
Thank you.
I know. Forgot about it. I made some excuse up for you.
I'm losing it.
But we did talk about it.
I'm sure. We're talking about the wind down and
Yeah. So we, you got enough on you.
I had a last one. It's 5. Maybe you want to go ahead? Absolutely.
Thank you.
Leica, right?
Leica.
Kathy, are you ready?
Want to go tomorrow morning?
Good afternoon,
Over
everybody.
the breakfast?
I'll pair it with you later.
Thank you for attending our monthly speaker series where we share our stories, and we have many people here that I'm sure would like to share their stories. But tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker and fellow Tide Point member, Fritz Hohn. Fritz was born in Germany, Berlin. His childhood days were spent playing in bombed-out World War II ruins of Berlin. Fritz was educated in Germany and holds a PhD in physics. Fritz was offered a job at IBM in New York. He was with IBM for 19 years. After IBM, Fritz joined Leica, the most advanced optical technology company in the world. He was instrumental in moving the division headquarters to the United States. An old friend at IBM recommended that he vacation on Hilton Head. As many of us, he fell in love with Hilton Head and purchased a home in Harbor Town, Sea Pines Plantation. Please join me in welcoming Fritz Hohn.
Take your mask off.
Looks better.
Yeah, much better.
Thank you for the introduction. I already met another German fellow here, and she and her husband used to live in Berlin. So it's nothing new for you. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I was born in Berlin and lived in Berlin actually for, I think, 33 years. I made all through the bad years in Berlin when the Soviets tried to gobble up West Berlin. Was a nightmare. I lived in West Berlin, and it was actually good living because the living standard in West Berlin very quickly after the war developed into very high level. Where's Natalie? Oh. Okay. There are so many stories actually about Berlin, about me being in Berlin, that I could fill probably a whole afternoon. But I would like to limit this to a certain time, maybe 30 minutes, so that you can ask questions. And I may actually apply for another talk here, my professional career, which was also a very, very interesting one. Okay. let me get going. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of this one. I wanted to make a copy, but I was too late with it. I got the map of Berlin too late. This is a map of Berlin, and you see the Tempelhof Airport down here. This is when we had the Berlin lift. All the planes are landing here. Later on, the Tegel Airport is up here. There's one significant thing which very few people actually know and realize. This is a way to Potsdam. And Potsdam is a famous castle, Sanssouci. In between Berlin and Potsdam, there's a small bridge which has a significant importance overall. I will talk about this one in a little while. So I leave this here just in case I want to refer back to it. And yeah, after the war, I played with friends in the ruins of Berlin. And it was actually a very good and a terrific playground for us little kids growing up in. It was dangerous because there were unexploded bombs all over the place, but that's okay. We made it. We made it, and we could spend hours and hours and hours playing in the ruins. Actually, it was very interesting, and I have almost no memory of the thing because it was early when I was 2 years old. I'm born in 1943. When I was 2 years old, I started to play in the ruins. And this was very early, and you lose some of the memories as you grow older. But I still remember some of the plays, some of the things that we did. Interestingly enough, Berlin, you know, after the war or during the war, there were 4 countries of the world that got together to defeat Germany, which was very good. America, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union actually, no, let me reset. There was a conference of these 4 countries in Yalta. Does anybody know where Yalta is? Yeah? Okay, Crimea. This is interesting because not too long ago in 2014, Putin took this in. The 3 Western forces, United States, France, and Britain, Great Britain, sat together with Stalin in Yalta, and they hashed it out how to divide up Germany. And they basically came up with the idea we have 4 sectors, and each one of the sectors belongs to one of us. So there is the Soviet Union, they got a sector, America got one, France and Britain also. And the same thing happened in Berlin. That Berlin was divided into 4 sectors, Berliner sectors. And they agreed in Yalta that this is it, how it should be divvied up. But the Soviets almost right away said, you know what, we would like to take Berlin over. And fortunately, the United States said absolutely not, and Britain and France agreed. We wanted, and the Berliners didn't like this at all, so was rejected. After this was rejected, the Soviet Union actually cut Berlin off of supplies. They closed the transit ways to West Germany. There were 3 of them, one to the north, one to the west, and one to the south. And they cut them all off. All the waterways and all the train ways were all blockaded. It's known as the Berlin blockade. And the United States, or the Americans, Lucius Clay, the name may ring a bell, may not. He was commandant in West Berlin, and he said, we organize an airlift from those 3 locations. You fly everything that you can imagine into Berlin. That's food, that's all supplies you can imagine, and the blockade lasted for about a year and a half, and we also needed firewood, coal to heat the apartments. Everything was flown into Berlin. Now you can imagine what a logistical nightmare this is. And every 4 minutes, a plane came in and landed at the Tempelhof airport. This was the only airport then that existed in Berlin. And every 4 minutes, a plane took off to go back to the Nuremberg, Hamburg, or Hanover. Those were the 3 on the other side. And every 4 minutes, a plane came in and a plane left. So I did live in Tempelhof, which is the district where the airport is. So, and one of the pilots actually decided that he would surprise us kids with candies. And as he landed, or as he flew over the last leg of the trip, he opened the window, and they could open the window, and he threw a couple of candies out. And we were standing down there, looking up, waiting for the candy to come down. Yeah, this was, I would say, one of the points where I start to remember things relatively well. And the Berlin lift lasted for about a year and a half, and then the Soviets said it doesn't work. So they said we do not want to continue this, and they opened up the pathways again, and goods to Berlin and to the Berliners could be brought in by land and by canals and by the train. So this was very interesting, and at the end, Soviet Union, Stalin agreed it won't work. So I think that this was a very good thing for the Berliners, because we could finally breathe again, at least for a little bit. I mean, you have to realize one thing, that I grew up always surrounded by communist country. And it's difficult, because you realize, and now you cannot just go up, hop in your car, and drive and go somewhere, because you always hit the communist country. Well, as it so is, some other things happened. Stalin could not agree or could not make up his mind. Berlin I can touch. He always tried again and again to intimidate Berliners, to agree to, hey, listen, yes, take it, we are sick of it. No, we were not sick of it, and he failed miserably in most of the instances. So, because Berlin was slowly starting to be built up and had a really very high standard of living developed already. And the East Berliners were very, very poor and did not have much of a living standard. Many of the people in East Germany actually moved over to Berlin, to West Berlin. They could. At the beginning, I could freely move between East Berlin and West Berlin. My grandparents lived in East Berlin. My parents settled down in West Berlin. And by being able to move back and forth, you maintain contact with your relatives. And I had and still have, I think, relatives in Berlin, former East Berlin. Unfortunately, these things have lived apart a little bit, so I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, this was part of the reason that the Soviet Union agreed to build the wall. They built the wall to prevent their citizens from being able to move to the West. They twisted it so and said, well, the West Berliners, they have a bad influence and we need to keep them out. But they wanted to keep their own people in because people that wanted to leave were the professionals, doctors, lawyers, scientists. If they could, they left. And this was a real brain drain on the East. Not only East Berlin, but also East Germany. So that almost intuitively, you had to build a wall. In any other way was not possible. Unfortunately, the wall was a big deal, and we had to live with it. Maybe that I can explain this a little bit here with this. This is the center of Berlin, and the wall was running right up here. This was East Berlin, and the north of it was the French district, the middle and the west part was British, and all of the south here belonged to the United States. This is how they divided Berlin up. By then, the standard of living in East Berlin and East Germany has deteriorated more and more and more. Whereas in West Berlin, we lived a very good life. Basically with support of the United States. The US tried to keep the standard of living in Berlin up, which they were able to do. Especially after the blockade was over and we could freely move between the two sides. Yeah, a short, a few words about the wall itself. The wall at first was one concrete barrier with barbed wire on top. Over the next 5 years, the barrier was and the wall was improved. They built a second wall alongside the first one, and in between they built a real death strip with dogs, with mines, minefields, so that nobody could go across. If you are in a situation like this and you have all television that we had, they could have as well. And you see how well the western side lives. You would try to escape. And there were about 4,000 attempts to escape. I think 1,500 were successful. And what I'm admiring actually, the ingenuity with which the East Germans approached this one. I mean, let me give you a couple of examples. One gentleman had in the East a cousin and her mother, and he had a English sports car. And what he did is very good. He took off, drove into East Berlin, took off the windshield, and hit the floor and drove without windshield. And the passengers themselves ducked in, and under the boom of the. And it was very great. Another one is, and much more elaborate. One of the West Berliners lived close to the wall, and he started to dig under his house a tunnel all the way into East Berlin, and there he come up a friend's house, came through the floor, and this way was a way for 26 people to escape. I mean, a great idea. The next thing, one more, and that's a engineer built from metal a little platform where he and his family could sit on, and from rugs and cloth he collected and sawed together a hot air balloon with the metal plate at the bottom. His family ducked on it, on the metal plate, and the hot air balloon. He waited for the wind to blow in the right direction, and the hot air balloon went up and over the wall and came down on the other side. I think this is phenomenal that people actually have these ideas. That's the way I can do this. So, and there are many other ways that people escaped from the east into the west despite the war. So life goes on, and at some point, And you know this. Reagan actually visited Berlin and he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down the wall. And maybe because of this, or maybe that they wanted to do this anyway, to take down the wall, they took down the wall. This was a big, big deal for Berliners. What I did is I packed my family. 2 of them are here. And no, I didn't pack Jack. But my 2 daughters and my wife and I, we took flights to Berlin because this is an event, a unification of a city that was so long divided by a wall. That's a world event, that's what I would say. And we flew into Berlin, and almost right away we said we have to see the wall. And unfortunately my wife got very ill and didn't want to come with us, but Natalie, Stephanie, and I, we went. And before then, I went to my brother, who still then and still today lives in Berlin, and asked him for a chisel and a big hammer. And because I wanted to go to the wall and pick out pieces of the wall. So I brought you a piece of the wall. That's in here.
And you know it's authentic because,
What?
and you know it's real because you actually did it.
Yeah. This is a piece of the concrete that made up the wall. And basically, over the next month or so, people were hammering out pieces like this from the wall. Became a good souvenir. Now here. This is the Brandenburg Gate, and right in front of it, this is the wall back here. And it goes around in a circle around the Brandenburg Gate. This is one of my daughters, and you see, very interesting by the way, you see that most of the bottom part of the wall here was chiseled out already. And it was about this high, how high people could reach actually. And up here, all the graffiti was still there. This is me. And of course, my other daughter, Stephanie, here, could not help it to climb on top of the wall. And guess what? She was chased off by one of the policemen from the other side, because the top of the wall and the wall was a property of East Germany. And here I am myself on top of the wall. So this was an interesting event. The wall came down, and America sent over people to take pieces of the wall actually and ship it to the U.S. And they are not these small pieces, but whole blocks that have made it around the world. And they're in museums and wherever they are, you will find pieces of the Berlin Wall. So I thought it was a very interesting thing. The Berlin Wall that came down this was the last straw, so to speak, for the East Germans and the communists, for Stalin, to hope that they could make an impact on Berlin, on themselves, extend their sphere of influence, and but they couldn't. Now, with the downfall of the wall, we had another thing that we recognized. There is a small bridge. Very few people know about it. You may not know about it either. There is a small bridge between Berlin and Potsdam. Berlin city and Potsdam smaller city. And there's a straight way going over the River Havel. And this bridge basically constitutes the Grenze, the border between East and West Berlin. And this bridge has a very specific and I think very important meaning. The bridge is built so that it is a very high crest, and the border actually at the crest of the bridge goes the border, and the river flows underneath. Now, if I was standing on this side of the bridge, I could not see the other side. I could not see what happened on the other side. Now, this was an ideal place to exchange spies. This is the so-called Freedom Bridge. The US, if they wanted to get rid of or bring one of their spies back from the Soviet Union, and they had somebody they would like, they both, the Soviet Union on this side, the United States on this side, brought in the spies, and they had to walk across a bridge, and they had to move, pass each other right where the white demarcation is on top of the bridge. And if something happens, the soldiers that administered the whole thing, they had the order to shoot. And I think it never happened actually that they had to shoot, because the one that the Americans let go was glad to be back in the Soviet Union, and the one that the Soviet Union let go was glad to be back in the US. And this Freedom Bridge is a little recognized landmark in Berlin. So I thought that this is something, if you ever have a chance to go to Berlin, that I think that is a place you should look at. So the wall came down, and it took a few more years, and I signed up at the Technical University of Berlin, a well-known, recognized education institution. And I signed up to get a degree in physics. And on an interesting thing, it was pretty tough. I signed up with 12 other students. And after the first examination, 5 dropped off, so there were only 7. After another couple of years, another 4 dropped off, so we were 3. And then I entered the PhD program, and there were only 2 that entered into the PhD program out of 12. That's quite a strong selection process. But I felt it was very good because the education was outstanding. And my PhD thesis I defended in Berlin, and then they sent me on 2 trips to conferences and said, you go ahead and present this because this is pretty good stuff. So I spent the next years at the university and finished in 1977, was a PhD in physics. Good education. And it's interesting, I was not even finished when IBM sent 2 managers over to visit me, to look at my work and see what I was doing. And when they left, they told me, you will hear from us. We would like you to consider to work for IBM. And at the end, I did consider to work for IBM, and it was a good decision. It was a right decision. IBM was then a terrific company. I don't know how they are today because they have completely changed. And but interesting that I was there when they designed and built Big Blue, a supercomputer, very fast, very capable, and I don't know, I think it was Bobby Fischer and Kasparov. One played against Big Blue, and the other one played chess against Big Blue, and Big Blue won the games. Then, very interesting, Bobby Fischer did something which I think he did on purpose. He made a stupid move in between, and the computer got a hiccup and didn't know what to do with such a crazy move. And he won the game. It's very interesting, but it was an enormous effort from the people at the IBM Watson Research Center to build the software and put it all together. And yeah, Big Blue was one of the things that I experienced firsthand. Okay, good. How long do I have?
Till 6.
What?
Till 6 o'clock.
Including questions?
No.
No.
6 is finished.
Okay. Do you have any questions so far? Because now I get into what I have been doing at IBM. Yeah.
You said the planes came in to the airport carrying all sorts of supplies in the
Yeah.
containers. Was there anything going out or just empty containers?
No, it also was going out, but much, much less. I mean, the airplanes came into Berlin loaded loaded with stuff. And then some things that were built and came from Berlin, companies that needed to go out, was loaded onto the empty airplanes. But not much. Yeah, that's one thing I at least wanted to mention. When I joined the university, somehow I felt a renewed freedom because school was busy and so on. And this new freedom, I went out and bought a old VW Beetle. Was not running anymore, but it still looked reasonable. And I looked at it, and I tried it, it wouldn't start. So I said, the only thing I can do is take the engine out and repair the engine. Now, it's very easy to take the engine out of a Beetle. There are exactly 4 nuts, 2 and 2. And if you have, and then you can wheel the engine out and drop it to the floor. And then you lift it, the Beetle up, and you can roll the engine away. What I did is I took the engine with my friends up into my apartment, or into my parents' apartment, where I took the whole thing apart. All balls, all nuts, everything. And I used all the plates and pots and pans and cups in the kitchen. And I put them all and labeled them all exactly, and I wrote down where it has to go. Now I bought some of the parts new, some of it was worn out, and so I wanted to rebuild the engine so that it really would work. So I put it back together. I think it took me total of half a year, actually. And then the engine went back into the Beetle. I started it, ran perfectly well. So I was very proud of myself. And my mother was happy that she got her kitchen back. So, yeah. Okay. Some things that I need to mention, because we went from Berlin right away to IBM, and that didn't happen this easy and quickly. When my wife and I made the decision that we would go, we would have to pack our kids, and we had to bring them over here without a single word of English. It's very interesting. What we did, actually, we took Natalie and Stephanie and put them in a summer camp, a day camp, so that through playing they would learn the language. And they did. After a couple of weeks, they were fluent. And after a couple of weeks, Natalie had to go to first grade in high school, not in high school, in elementary school, and Stephanie went to Montessori school. And they were both, after a relatively short period of time, fluent in English. And this at least taught me that you can expect a lot of children, that they can manage and cope with a lot of adverse situation, which has helped, I think, both of them over the years. Yeah, as we started to get our lives together in the United States, we always were cognizant of my two daughters, that they were not born here, and therefore we anticipated or thought that they would have this or that difficulty, but they never had, which was very interesting and educational. So, yes.
I have a question, but it's going back from when you were just moved here. How did the standard of living for the West Berliners, how was it so high so soon after the war?
If I understood you correctly, what you want to know, after the war, how come that we could achieve this kind of high level of living standard? Berlin was supplied with everything you can imagine. I mean, we had 3 airways, air corridors, 3 autobahns from Berlin to Hamburg, Hanover, Nuremberg. We had good waterways, and we had very good train system. And this overall was enough to get all the necessary supply into Berlin. Yeah.
I think the question is, why was the West so much more affluent than the East? And probably because the Western Allies made a huge effort to make the West more.
Yeah.
Weren't bridges destroyed and train stations destroyed during the war?
Say this again?
Weren't bridges and train stations?
Yeah, most of it was destroyed, yes. But the Western Allies helped us to rebuild it quickly. I mean, one of the things that I should mention, although it may not be very important, but the Allies, our Allies, helped us to develop Berlin and rebuild Berlin very quickly. It didn't take very long that Berlin was built up again. Totally different than the eastern part. The eastern part, the Soviet Union actually pulled all the money they could out of East Berlin and East Germany. They remained poor, and they did not have the level of living that we had in West Berlin. Yeah.
Were you in the American section?
Yes. Yeah.
Could you get to West Germany while you were, growing up?
Yeah. I could go to West Germany. It was difficult because I had to use, if you go with a car, I had to drive into East Germany, and then you are not allowed to stop anywhere. You go in and you drive all the way through, and you have to leave again. But I had the opportunity to go and visit West Germany. I had an uncle that was a veterinarian, and he lived close to Bielefeld and had a veterinarian practice, yeah, and he served many of the farms, yeah, many of the farms in his area. And it was very nice to be able to go over and sit in his car when he drove around, and I was delighted to have this opportunity.
The education system, the university you went to, did that have to be resurrected after the war, or was the education always?
Yeah, no, this was an interesting question. The university after the war had to be completely rebuilt. They did not acknowledge anyone who was a professor before, except that if you applied again, you got preference. So many of the professors were from the old educational system. The curriculum was basically the same as it was before the war. And I went in Berlin as a technical university to a Professor Birsch. He was worldwide known for the work that he did, and got a very good first education. And then he retired, and I became a student and an assistant to Professor Niedrich. The name doesn't probably ring a bell, but they were world-known capacities in their fields. Does it answer your question? Huh? Okay. Any more questions?
Where did you arrive in the States with IBM?
I worked for IBM in New York, and we arrived. When we decided to go to the United States, we at first came here on a visitor's visa, and I went with my wife and the two kids through New York immigration. And interesting story, they needed to give blood, and our children was not used to give blood. And no, we don't. I said, I give blood first, and then you give blood too. So they did. I worked for IBM in New York at the Watson Research Center, and it was a great job actually. I got there, and
Is that New York City?
no, not in New York City. That's Westchester, north of the city.
Poughkeepsie?
White Plains?
Yorktown. Yeah.
White Plains?
No, north of White Plains. Yorktown. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like we're running out of time, but the parts of the story that I find interesting is when you finished up at IBM, you did something entrepreneurial and went back to Germany. Can you summarize that really quick?
Yeah, okay. I finished with IBM at some point because our parents, my wife's parents and my parents, got very old, and they slowly lost their capacity to think and to function properly. But they still were living in their apartments. So my wife started to travel back and forth, spent 2 weeks in Berlin with our parents, came back for 2 weeks, spent another 2 weeks with our parents in Berlin. And at some point I said, you know, this is not a life, not for you and not for me. So why don't we go back? I quit IBM and I look for another job in Germany. And we agreed, and interestingly enough, I sat down same evening and sent to 3 people or colleagues that I knew are working in the semiconductor field in Germany. I'm looking for a job. Do you have anything? Next morning popped up right away. Fritz, don't look any further. I have the job for you. And this was my Leica job. And so we decided that we go back, and I took the job at Leica, small town close to Wetzlar, close to Frankfurt. It's Wetzlar. And it was another interesting, very, very interesting job. I mean, I took the semiconductor equipment division of Leica at a 30 million euro annual revenue. Very small company. And they were losing quite a bit of money. And I built it and built it and built it, and I redefined the product portfolio to make it completely software controlled and integrated with a semiconductor production facility. And all of a sudden, the revenues exploded and were profitable. So from 30 million in a little bit less than 5 years, 4.5 years, I had it at 118 million and 27% profitability. What needed to be done in order to get this, the United States is the premier location for semiconductor. Not anymore, I should be careful. There are TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They are probably the leading semiconductor company in the world right now. But IBM was one of the premier companies in the semiconductor industry. That's why it was very interesting to work there. And when I joined Leica, after 3 years, I thought, I talked to the chief executive, and I said, I have to move my headquarters for the division from Wetzlar into the United States, somewhere where there are semiconductor companies around. And we ended up in close to the IAD airport, and there is IBM Manassas, there is White Oaks, big Siemens facilities. So it was a good location to locate the headquarters of the division. And for me, this was a great, ideal way, and for my wife, to go back to the United States.
Which timed very coincidentally to your first grandchild that was born. Remember, we had
And Julia.
as soon as your grandchildren were born, you moved that company. Within 9 months of the first birth, you moved that whole company back from Germany. You're making it sound like it's close to Lotus.
Yeah.
You're making it sound like it was a business decision, not a...
Yeah, it was a business decision. It really was. No question about it. Okay. Thank you for listening. Thank you for questions.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fritz. That was very entertaining and interesting, and I'm sure it was a fabulous life. Next month we have, second Monday in the month, we have Bill Walston who's going to be speaking. So put you on your calendar. Bill Walston will be speaking. Bill's over there. And hope to see you then. And again, thank you, Fritz.
Yeah. Hmm?